Good morning, my fellow yogic travelers. As we continue with our Dharma tributaries, this week I'm working on the Sufi teachings that I've received from the mystic world of the Islamic tradition. And I mentioned that the first day I was talking about my experience with the Sufi choir, and I learned the dances of universal peace from Samuel Lewis, who is both a Zen master and a high initiate within the Sufi tradition. And he comes from the Chishti order, where Hazrat Nayat Khan was a musician who then learned to tune souls instead of tune a sitar. And his son is the next person that I was involved with, which was called Pir Valayat Khan. Pir is just like sensei or guru. And he was very interested in ecumenism and merging all of the world's traditions, but he did it in a way that wasn't so much credo based, because ultimately Sufism is the religion of the heart. But he tried to marry opposites together, as Jung talked about conjunctio oppositorum, like yin and yang together make up the whole Tao. And he did what he called the reconciliation of irreconcilables, things that don't seem to go together, but in some way it's strange that each person is isolated and yet within God's unity, you could say. Something is always being sought outside of ourselves that can only be found within ourselves. And yet, what he's trying to do is not to identify so much with a bodily form as with a certain kind of vibratory form. I want to identify yourself with your aura, with the electromagnetic force that has no boundary. Right? Like we said, the body is in the soul. The soul is not in the body. This electromagnetic, pranic aspect of our own anatomy that radiates from our physical being but is not our physical being, and yet we tend to identify ourselves with our physical being. So the radiance of our own kind of bioluminescence, you could say, it's photic, it's filled with light. We are slowed down light, right? I love the way Einstein always says, matter is spirit reduced to the point of visibility, just rotating at a much slower speed, so it seems like it's a coagulum. It seems very, very solid on this plane, although physicists would tell us we have a very, very different view of what we are in terms of looking at it from an atomic level. So one of the paradoxes that we face is, if we admit that we have some kind of divine inheritance, how do we accept that while also recognizing how flawed we are as human beings? I don't want to go as far as just saying we're all born in sin, but the concept of recognizing that we're half and half. We have sides to ourselves that are beautiful and wonderful, and we have other sides to ourselves that are filled with malfeasance and heinous actions. But to accept our divinity while admitting that we're flawed, the only way we can do this is if we continue to stay ignorant of what our potentials are. If we're ignorant of the freedom, right, that we possibly could be embodying, instead of the limits that we impose upon ourselves and denigrate ourselves. Almost everyone has some kind of self-esteem problem where they feel inadequate, less than. And so when your self-worth suffers, it's very, very hard to think that there's a part of you that is connected to living spirit, because you're so much more aware of the glaring inconsistencies. So this is where we come to creative imagination. How to use that power in your own mind, not to be alienated from everything, not to be imprisoned by everything. But how do you find some kind of creative fluctuation to break the sclerotic or the hardened aspect of our own narrative that boxes us in and tells us we can only be this and we're not other things? So it's as if we have to ask, what if I could see things from a different perspective? How would it look differently? How would I come up with new and creative solutions? Even if it means at the beginning I need to see a teacher who might reflect back to me more clearly than I can reflect to myself who I really am. So, cause, all these teachings are cause to pause, stop, get out of the rat race, step out of the social net. It's one way that you're better able to see your problems and unfurl the potentials of your own being. Hopefully there will be illumination, a light-filled understanding, realization, now I see. And then the awakening. The rest of your life becomes an embodiment to free yourself from the false image of I'm only the body or I'm only my storyline and my conditions. And then converge as you diverge, right? You inhale, you breathe in the cosmic substance, you fill yourself up with that energy, and then you exhale, you surrender yourself back into emptying out, and you'll find out what happens. So, as you know, I like to share poetry and stories to get across some of these ideas. Another one from Rumi, The Core of Masculinity. The core of masculinity does not derive from being male, no friendliness from those who console. Your old grandmother says, you look a little pale, maybe you shouldn't go to school today. Run when you hear that. A father's stern slaps are better. The severe father scolds, but wants spiritual clarity. Eventually, he leads you into the open. Pray for a tough instructor to see and hear and stay within you. We've been busy accumulating solace. Make us afraid of how we were. Make us afraid of how we were. So once you gobsmack yourself over the side of the head and realize I got to wake up and live in a different way, then you're open. Then you're open to understanding, to learning, to dropping your own point of view and allowing something else in. Nature abhors a vacuum. Empty yourself out. It won't be a sterile void. It'll be a pregnant void. Something will come forth from that. So this story is called The Indian Bird, also from Rumi, and it has a lot to do with the importance of indirect learning. Once upon a time, there was a man who had a bird, and he was about to travel back to India, where the bird was from. And in a strange way, he not only asked his wife and his children and his servants, what can I bring you from India? But he said to the birds, anything I can bring you from India? He says, well, I know, the bird said to him, I know you're going back to the place where I was captured. Why don't you go to this particular forest and call out to my relatives and let them know that I've been captured so they won't be freaked out about not knowing where I am? I said, okay, I can do that. So he went about his business, got all the things that he needed to while he was there for his wife, his kids, his servants, and so forth. And then he went to this part of the forest where the bird told him he was captured. And he called out and said, oh, birds, I just want to let you know that I have your relative. And he wanted to let me know that he was in captivity. And the moment he finished saying that, a bird fell out of the trees, dropped dead at his feet. Oh, my God, he said. Oh, this is terrible. The news was such a shock that the bird had a heart attack. Too bad. So he went back and gave his gifts to his wife and his kids and his servants. And of course, then he went to the bird, and the bird was anxious. So did you go to see my relatives? I said, yeah, I'm sorry I did, but I got to tell you, this is not such good news. What happened? He says, well, as soon as I told them you were captive, one of them dropped out of the tree, dead at my feet. Shock was too much for him. The moment the bird heard that, he spun around, just dropped dead to the bottom of his cage. Oh my God, the man thought. He couldn't take it either. Oh, this is so terrible. I am so sorry. So he opened the cage, he took the bird out, he laid it on the sill to decide what to do with it. And all of a sudden the bird revived, flew away to a branch on a tree near the house, and then spoke to the master and said, thank you for telling me the information from my relatives about how I could get myself free. So I don't know if this is similar to a yogic non-attachment or a Jesus be in the world but not of the world. But there's an aspect in which a part of you has to kind of play dead. A part of you has to be out of the game. A part of you has to no longer be willing to live unloving social roles. And somehow if you allow that part of yourself to die, you get free in a certain way. Or at least you could say you're immune in a certain way to the way the masses tend to run ahead like lemmings. And so sometimes you have to stand alone and not do just what the masses do. I hope you all get that gift. See you soon.